Hello everyone, I'm Asha Nayaswami, and I'm here to share with you some selections from my soon-to-be published book, Swami Kriyananda, Lightbearer. So the chapter I'm reading from today, the book is a chronological year by year of my life with Swami Kriyananda from when I first met him in 1969 until his passing in 2013. So I'm reading now from the year 1995. At that time in Ananda's history, we were right in the middle of what turned out to be 12 years of litigation. The original lawsuit was filed against us by Self-Realization Fellowship. The issues were theological that were attempting to be litigated in a court of law. Then there was a second lawsuit filed 4 years later in 1994, which was essentially a personal attack on the integrity of Swami Kriyananda and of Ananda itself. And Swami Kriyananda was subjected to ultimately 80 hours of depositions in that second lawsuit. The whole story of all the lawsuits and everything is contained in this book. But this chapter actually happens in India. But the context is that Swamiji was being severely tested. We were all being severely tested by this very vicious attack. Swami was accused of, basically make a list of every abuse you could imagine for a cult leader, and they were all being heaped upon his head. It was quite a trying time. So, here we go. Swamiji still had to face more days of deposition, but not until December. He decided to take seclusion in India. A friend arranged for a house for him in Rishikesh. We were leading a pilgrimage at the same time, and our group of 35 met him there. We knew his cottage was on the Ganges, but assumed it would be away from the populated area. We were surprised that it was right next to the ferryboat dock. Still, it was a charming cottage, perched on the edge of the steep riverbank with a wide balcony overlooking the water. Our hotel was on the opposite side of the river, so we took the ferry across. When we landed, we started chanting as we processed the short distance to Swamiji's front door. In India, such outward expressions of devotion are looked upon with favor, so it was our joy to honor him in this way. He had been trying to keep a low profile, he said later, and we really blew his cover. He intended to resume his status as a Swami, but hadn't done it yet, so was still wearing white. About 1981, Swamiji ceased being a sannyasi and eventually married, and he was married for about 7 years. But by this point in his life, that marriage had dissolved, and he was going to reassume his status as a Swami, which would have changed the color that he wore from white back to orange. He intended to resume his status as a Swami, but hadn't done it yet, so was still wearing white. From my diary at the time: white shirt, white pants, white hair, silver glasses, light eyes and skin. His aura was so expanded. His body seemed only a translucent outline of a man in front of a beam of pure white light. All the Western, outward-moving, accomplishment-oriented energy that usually accompanied him was gone. He was utterly relaxed, completely approachable, sitting quietly while we settled ourselves in his living room, which was barely large enough to hold the whole group. He had bought some sweets, arranged them on a tray, cut them into small pieces, and asked that they be passed around. He wanted us to eat in his presence. Sharing food in the company of a holy person is a way of absorbing his vibrations, especially when the food has been prepared for us by his own hands. He offered to answer questions. Someone asked about traveling in India. He said, "The best way is with your eyes closed." He meant it 2 ways: to take the ancient vibrations deep inside, and not to be distracted or dismayed by present conditions. He said, "Many of those who have incarnated in India now are not really Indian souls in the way we are. Even though they were born here, they are not in tune with the deeper values of this culture. That is why there is so much confusion in India right now. So many of its citizens are just temporary visitors, tourists traveling through the dimension of time. We too are temporary visitors, tourists traveling through the dimension of space, 10,000 miles of it, halfway around the world. For many of us, though, India is our true home. Last night when I was out for a walk, Swamiji said, I thought, in America we would keep the streets cleaner. But then I asked myself, then what would you have? The answer, clean streets. Is it really worthwhile to devote so much energy and attention merely to making the world the way we want it? One good thing about travel is that it shows you there is no one criteria of how things ought to be. There are many ways of being. We talked together as a group, meditated with Swamiji, then went out on the balcony to take pictures and enjoy the view. When we left for the boat dock, Swamiji stood on the balcony watching us. Again from my diary. As long as I live, and for incarnations beyond, the image of Swamiji standing on the balcony of his house will be imprinted on my soul like the image of the sun on an exposed negative. While the usual Indian confusion reigned around me, I sat perfectly still at the very front of the boat, staring at Swamiji standing on the porch. The dock keepers filled our boat, added even more people, took people off, then put them on again. Swamiji smiled joyously, clearly enjoying the scene. At one point he called out, "A lot of people in the boat." Then suddenly he exited and returned with his camera. He took a few photos, then continued quietly watching. Swamiji's house was painted bright yellow-orange, with darker orange trim, and a big Om symbol on the roof right above his head. The whiteness of his being was intensified by the colors behind. Everything else in the scene, boats, people, buildings, even the Ganges itself, was for me just the backdrop for the white figure on the balcony. I wondered why everyone was not staring at him. A river of joy and love flowed from him into my heart. The scriptures say one moment in the company of a saint will be your raft over the ocean of delusion. I was wearing a big sun hat and huge dark glasses, which intensified the feeling of living in a world where only Swamiji and I existed, united by a beam of divine friendship. Never had I seen him more openly show his true divine self. I remember him saying, "Italians live in the heart, so in Italy I can give more of who I am than I can in America. In India, though, they understand. There, I can give everything." A few weeks later, we met Swamiji again in Delhi, now at the end of our pilgrimage tour. He was still wearing white, so we asked him about resuming his status as a Swami. He had thought, he said, to ask Swami Chidananda, president of the Divine Life Society, to reinitiate him. He was a friend, and Swamiji held him in very high regard. But he had to leave town, and I didn't want to take the initiation from just anyone. Later, he talked to others who could speak with authority about the Indian tradition. An organization, they said, can absolve you of your vow to them, but being a Swami is between you and God. He didn't need to be reinitiated. I only relinquished my vow as a sacrifice for Ananda, Swamiji said. In my heart, I never gave it up. So when he was in Kolkata, he went to Master's home at 4 Garpar Road. I prayed in Master's meditation room. There was a noisy fan blowing my hair all around. It wasn't quite the ceremony I had imagined. His voice trailed off. Ceremony or not, in his heart it was done. Later he told us, in many ways it was a difficult seclusion. I was plunged into states of depression and despair. I felt Satan was trying to get to me. I didn't mind. I just clung to Master, meditated, and little by little, the dark feeling would go away. On another occasion, he said, the way of Satan is to make you feel totally discouraged. A master can criticize and correct you, even scold you fiercely, but he leaves you with hope. Satan leaves you feeling hopeless. That's how you can tell you are being influenced by the dark force. I just wanted to explain just one small thing here because, pulled out of context, you don't know. Swamiji, speaking of his Swami vow, I only relinquish my vow as a sacrifice for Ananda. In 1981, when he ceased his formal status as a Swami and lived as a householder for much of the next decade, it was because he saw that at Ananda at that time, as he put it, people were embarrassed to be married and ashamed to have children. And the monastic side of the World Brotherhood colony of Ananda was flourishing. Almost a third of the community, more than a third of the community had joined the monastery. But the householder side was languishing. And Swami was aware of the fact that every significant energy at Ananda was created and defined by him. And he went through a very long and inward process of introspection and meditation with Master before he felt guided to assume the life of a householder himself, which he did. And even though eventually he went back to being a Swami, that decade in which that was his lifestyle totally put the community in a new direction, where the householder side was suddenly as strong and vibrant and as deep and respected as the monastic. So those are all the treasures that await you within this book. I'm reading now from these pages, which is actually the unbound galley of the book. So we are really just probably a week away from having a single copy in our hands, and about 3 weeks away from the whole shipment being delivered from Hong Kong. God bless you.